started early so I can go a little longer, and we might make it. Okay. So we've been working our way through Genesis, and I was in the process of preparing for this section. I've been thinking about this actually for years, thinking about it, looking at it, the topic, and one of the reasons I wanted us to do Genesis is so that we would have an opportunity to take this topic and deal with it, because I think it's something that's actually important, but we don't deal with it very often. Last week we kind of opened that up a bit, and I would encourage you, if you weren't here, maybe go back and actually watch that. We're going to do a review of it, simply because I knew there would probably be people here this week that weren't here last week, and I didn't want you to be lost. In the process of, though, going through this, I was listening to a gentleman who was new to a church, and him and his wife had been there a couple weeks. I thought it was really good. They got there that Sunday, and the pastor was teaching through 1 Peter, or 2 Peter, can't remember which. Anyway, this topic's dealt with them both. And he got to one of the passages we'll look at this morning, and the pastor simply said, well, we're at this section, but it's just too weird, so we're going to skip that. And he just went to the next one. So, you don't have that here. I jump into the deep end of the pool with the weird stuff. But I also want to do that not just so that I can be salacious, but because God tells us these things. I mean, he obviously wants us to know them, or he wouldn't put them in the scriptures. They are confusing, but they are something that he wants us to be aware of. So we are going to tackle that. I do want to mention one last time this names and meanings. Saw something else on this week, and they were cautioning about this. This is a little bit contrived to get to these meanings, and I had kind of cautioned you on that when I shared it. I said, there's some synonyms, and it depends on which synonym you choose as to whether or not this even works or not. And so I'm not encouraging you to use it. I'm saying my caution is maybe don't use it. It's interesting, but it's not something I want to promote you to say, hey, Thanksgiving dinner, look at what I found. That's probably not a good thing. So, all right, with that said, that's my introduction. Here we go. The topic we're about to talk about, why does it matter? I gave you this last week. At the end, I want to add to this. So last week we saw that God has revealed these things in his word, and it is our duty to figure out their importance. That's that way with every odd thing you come across. That's Jonah and the fish, right? That's weird. I think part of the reason it's there is so that skeptics will not believe. But for you and I, it's like, yeah, I know what he did in my heart, and that's more of a miracle than living in a fish for 3 days, right? So that if you've been changed by him, these other things don't seem unusual. The other thing, though, is then Jesus uses it as a picture of his death and resurrection, right? So he's kind of setting the stage to use that later. This isn't that topic, but my point is, anything you come across in the scripture that's odd or unusual or you don't understand, don't set it aside. I would encourage you to get a notebook and write those things down and put a date by it. And then when you figure it out, go back and write the answer to it. And it'll be an amazing thing 30 years down the road to go, wow, look at all these things that I thought were unusual and now I understand. That'll be an encouragement to you. This was our primary passage last week. I'm not going to read through the whole thing. This is the primary verse that kind of stumbles people. God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods, he holds judgment. We broke that down, the Greek or the Hebrew in this case. It really does say that. It uses the word Elohim. Elohim has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the Elohim, he holds judgment. We know it's multiple because it's in the midst. The word Elohim is like the word sheep. It's singular and plural both. So it's an Elohim and another Elohim, but we know it's plural. So we answered the question, what is going on here? It is God in the midst, God is in a meeting with other gods. That really is what it says. The problem is we misunderstand the word Elohim that we've translated God. Elohim means spiritual being. Angels are referred to that way. God is referred to that way. Samuel, after he has died and is coming back up to the witch of Endor and to Saul, is called an Elohim. It's a spiritual being. So that's really what this is. It's not saying there's actually more than one God, Yahweh. There's only one God, but there are a bunch of spiritual beings, and we mostly think of them as angels. Therefore, this passage is important to our understanding of who God is and how he relates to us and other heavenly beings, and that's what we saw there. We're going to see this unfold continuing on through part of the rest of our book of Genesis here as well. Sons of God. I wanted to make sure we saw this. Sons of God in the Old Testament is used to speak of angels, and here's two examples in early Job, and then in Job 38, he's talking about the foundations of the world, and when its bases and cornerstone were laid, and then he says, all the sons of God shouted for joy. Clearly not humans, we weren't created yet. So when he's forming the earth, the only ones present for that would have been the angels, and so this is a good way of demonstrating that. So who are sons of the Most High? Well, it's not Jesus in this case. He comes in next in the passage. This one is angels is who he's talking about. Angels are Elohim, so really what he is saying is it's the Elohim. So I added this later in our morning to that thing I showed you earlier. No, I'm sorry, this is it is, I'm sorry. Other Elohim is who he's talking to. That's who are these gods of Psalms 82:1? They're other Elohim. Yahweh is the only triune Elohim that is the creator of all, but he is not the only Elohim. There's a bunch of spiritual beings, but only one Yahweh. All gods, small g, are Elohim, but not all Elohim are Yahweh. It's just a different way of saying the same kind of thing. So, and then he says this, arise, O God. Now we've capitalized it for clarity. He's actually referring to Jesus here. O God, judge the earth. We know that Jesus is the one who will ultimately judge the earth. For you shall inherit all the nations. And we know that that's how everything concludes, is with him inheriting the control of all the nations. So we answered the question. Yes, that's Jesus. And so what are Elohim? Elohim is a heavenly being in the heavenly realm in the same way that you and I are human beings in the earthly realm. So that's what we looked at last week. So that I just wanted to kind of set the stage. If you weren't here, make sure you understand where we're coming from. So now we arrive at our main passage of this morning, and that is when God began, or when man began to multiply on the earth. So I'm going to have one of you read this because clearly I can't read today, so or most Sundays for that matter. But go ahead and one of you, if you would, read this passage for us.
When man began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any that they chose. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart.
So, let's just kind of walk through this. When man began to multiply on the earth, they're just having more and more children. Generations are going along. And they do have not just the sons that are listed, but there's daughters also being born to them. One thing, again, I think we flaw in our thinking, so just as a quick caveat or reminder to all of us, we did not start as cavemen and have advanced to the point we're now beautiful people. We started as incredibly beautiful people, and we're going downhill. And now with plastic surgery, you can try to be beautiful again. No, the point is, I just think we have that backwards in our thinking. These folks would have been genetically perfect in the beginning. What makes someone attractive or unattractive is largely symmetry. If everything is very symmetrical about their appearance and they're very proportional, like I'm not, my point is, if you have all that going and that's just perfect, that's attractive to someone else. What makes us less attractive is when you have an eye that's slightly off, or your ears are set too far out, or all those things, right? That's all genetic. So my point is, it's unsurprising what we see next, and that is these sons of God saw the women, the daughters of men, as attractive. Of course they were. I would imagine all the women of that day were very attractive, just like all the men were very attractive. It was very early on in the path of creation. So this is our next line, though, the sons of God. And so who are the sons of God in Genesis 6:2? We answered it last week, so we'll save some time and just say that's angels. That's who that is. We see that all through the Old Testament. There is another view. The other view is that this is referring to the Sethite godly line are the sons of God. The daughters of men are the daughters of Cain, descendants of Cain. So it's this bad intermarriage of godly and ungodly. It would be the only time that the sons of God refer to that. There's just a bunch of flaws with that logic as you go through this, and I think you'll see that as we continue to work our way through it. The offspring of this union are described as men of renown. There's something different about them. If you have an unsaved man marrying a saved woman or vice versa, their kids are the exact same as if they were both saved. There's no difference in their offspring. Now they may not behave well or something, but there's nothing weird about them. These were men of renown. These offspring are different. So there's something going on here. I think you can see that again as we move through. I think it'll become more clear. So let's just keep moving. The sons of God saw the daughters of men were attractive, as I mentioned, and they took as their wives any they chose. Now, the any they chose indicates the women did not have a choice in the matter. It's kind of the way you could read it that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that. Again, we know that they were a wicked people at this time. Women are attracted to attractive men just as much as attractive men are attracted to attractive women. I would assume these sons of God were quite attractive. So it just may be a way of saying any one of these women they wanted, they could get, because the women were very willing. You know what I mean? We don't really know, so I'm not going to read too much into that. I just want to, that can be seen kind of two different ways there. And we're not really told specifically. I'm not sure why I put, so who are the sons of God in Genesis 6:2? They are angels, but they're not all the angels. They are the angels that are acting in rebellion to God because they are taking these human women as wives. That's a rebellion. So these sons of God are a specific group of sons of God. So let's talk about that for a second. You have sons of God, all angels. Then you have those who have rebelled against God. So you have Michael, the archangel, who's a good angel, right? But then you have Satan, and he's an angel, but he's no longer a good guy, right? So, and there's a bunch on his team. This would be some of them. So don't see it as that it's all the bad angels are involved. Not necessarily. We're not told how many. So that's something to bear in mind. They are the angels in rebellion, but not all of them. Now then the question is, okay, is it a dozen? Is it 50? Is it 500? How many of these angels are involved? Again, not really told, but I think we might have a clue at some point later that we can look at. Not sure why it does that. I think I left the transition setting on in a slide. I didn't mean to. Okay. What do we know for sure about this rebellion? So that's the thing I want us to divide this into. So we can see the rebellion, okay, sons of God taking daughters of men, they're marrying. We know some things, we don't know some other things. So let's kind of break that down. What do we know? What do we not know? I think that's an important thing to start with. I'm skipping over a section. We'll come back to it later because it's kind of a separate thought. It says that, what we just read, and then it has a separate thought, and then he jumps to this, which is tied in. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. What days? When the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. Go ahead.
I have a question. The Nephilim are the bad angels?
We're going to get to that because we're going to have to answer that
That's
question.
another word. I'm getting confused.
Who are the Nephilim? What's going on there? Yeah, no, you're right. Go ahead.
This would prove that angels have the ability to take on human form or physical form, then, right? I mean,
Here's the
I
thing.
guess-
Yeah, well, there's all these verses that I thought weeks leading up, I got to remember to grab that one. I got to remember. And I thought of two more sitting over here, and I wrote them down, and I did not grab that one. But it's in Matthew. There's a question asked to Jesus about who is this woman's wife in the resurrection. She's married to a man. He dies. Her brother, or his brother, 7 husbands. They all die. They're in heaven. Who's the husband? Aha, we caught you, right? And he's like, you don't understand. That's not how that works. I'm paraphrasing, that's not what he said, but his point is that's not how that works. In the resurrection, they'll be like the angels who are not married or given in marriage. He does not say they can't have children. He just says they don't marry or given in marriage. There's no reason that they would. What's one of the purposes of marriage? Procreation of our species, right? Of the human race. There's no angels being born. I don't even think there are female angels. I think they're all male. Every angel name we have is a male name. They always appear as males. So the point is, there's no reason to have marriage of angels to produce more angels because there are no producing of more angels. So there's no need for them to do that. That doesn't necessarily mean that they aren't men, right? Or that they don't look like men. And in fact, every instance we see in the scriptures where they interact, it's always, I saw a man standing there. I saw 3 men standing there. They look exactly like people in most cases. Now, there are times when an angel comes and is glowing and all this, and it freaks people out. But often it's not that way. Again, don't remember the passage. I was going to find it and forgot. Be careful when you entertain strangers, for you may have entertained angels unaware. Unaware? I thought the wings would give them away. No, they don't have that, right? They look just like a normal person. So, my take on that, and this is me, this is not, I can't give you chapter and verse. I don't think angels are smoky beings that you can put your hand through. I think they're like you and I, but in a different realm. And every once in a while, God allows those realms to cross and you can simply see them. There's a passage in 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st, 2nd Samuel, I don't remember, I think it's in Kings. And I'm pretty sure it's Elisha. Elisha is surrounded by the Syrian army. And his manservant, or whatever you call him, his butler, says, we're surrounded, we're all gonna die. He panics. And Elisha says, Lord, help him see the reality of and he sticks his head out, and they are surrounded by these flaming chariots and angels, and it's like, the cavalry has showed up, and he looks, and they're gone. He just got the veil pulled back, and he could see reality, and now he can again. That's how this interaction works. They're always there. I would have no doubt there are angels in this room that we can't see, that kind of thing. But if they materialized, they wouldn't look like, something in a picture. They would look like Steve or, something like that. Maybe dressed in white, I don't know. But I don't think they would be this completely, probably very attractive. We'd wonder why we hadn't seen them in a movie or something, So that, you can't go beyond what it says, but I don't think we should take a verse like the one in Matthew that says they're not given in marriage and say, oh, see, haha, they can't have, well, we don't know that. We'll get into that more. Let me keep moving through this. So he says that they take these angels, they take wives of any they chose. Then it says, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. It doesn't say they had Nephilim. It says the Nephilim were on the earth in those days. So we have to be careful there, right? When the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. So this is really explicit. It's Bible language for these sons of God had physical, sexual relationship with women, and they bore children. Now, you could say, well, these angels, these fallen angels, possessed earthly men, and that's how they accomplished that. That's possible. I'm not going to say that isn't what happened. That doesn't really make sense in the passage of why these are mighty men renowned if they're just possessed. That doesn't make sense. But, so I don't know. But it seems more likely to me that there is this crossing of a barrier between the realms that is not what God had ordained to it. His original plan is that that does not happen, and they violate that. And we'll see that as we go through the morning. I'm building a case here in pieces. So if my stack of bricks are not enough to sway you yet, give me some time, and maybe by the end there will be a big enough pile of evidence. So who are the Nephilim, to your question? We're not explicitly told, but because it's stated in the context in which it's stated, it seems as though the Nephilim are this offspring. These children that are born of this strange union seem to be what the Nephilim are. Now, one thing, when it says right here, when, okay? You look this word up in the Hebrew lexicon, and it's word used like, I don't remember the number, but it was massive, 3,000 times or something. But it's like the word witch in English or something. It's used constantly. When, it's just, this word is used tons of ways. It could mean a lot of different things. It's like a filler word that connects things so that you can understand. And sometimes it means when, sometimes it means where, sometimes it means which, whereas, whenas, all these other, it's kind of an odd word. So as I'm looking at from more like Hebrew scholarship, which I don't know anything about Hebrew, the language specifically, they're saying that there is good evidence that you could translate that whenever. The grammar on it could easily be communicating whenever. That's not how they translate it, but it could be translated that way. So if you read it that way, whenever the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, what days? Whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of men. That would make sense. There's a correlation there. Even if you remove the whenever and you simply say, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days when the sons of God came in, there's still the connection. The reason the whenever kind of makes sense is because of that thing I've skipped over and also after. So it happened then, but it also happened after. So whenever this happened, you saw Nephilim. So I think it's probably better to say whenever. And again, when or whenever, either one are not in the Bible that Moses wrote. It's a translation. We're trying to figure out how to say that in English. So I'm not changing the Bible, I'm trying to figure out what the Bible says. And Hebrew scholars say you could translate that whenever. So just for that, put that in the back of your mind. I would say the Nephilim are these in this next line. These, the Nephilim, were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. If you just read through that, it makes sense that that's who the these is talking about. It's the Nephilim, that's the these. Go ahead.
My New Living Translation
Yep.
kind of says what you're saying. In those days and for some time after, giant Nephilites lived on the earth, for whenever the sons of God had intercourse with women, they gave birth to children who became heroes and famous warriors of ancient times.
Yeah. Again, translation, right? But that's their stab at translating, and they're saying based on, Hebrew lexicons and all these other things and their understanding, I don't know that that's a bad translation. Yeah.
It's the way it's phrased that makes it
Yeah.
confusing.
And here's the problem: you're going from a Hebrew to an English, and it's challenging to do that.
Why not say their children were called Nephilites? Make it simple.
Well, you can ask God when you get there. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you do it that way? And he would say, it is the glory of God to hide a thing, and the glory of kings to dig it out. We looked at that last week. It's in Proverbs. So what do we know for sure? We know for sure the Nephilim were on the earth. That's something we can just say we know that. Okay, we're told that pretty explicitly. Here's 1 Peter 3:18-20. For Christ also suffered once for sin, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but being made alive in the spirit. So he's now transitioned back to the unseen realm, and he's operating there as a spirit in the unseen realm, is kind of what that's referring to. In which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison. Now, if you were here for our 1 Peter study, I've probably mentioned this to you guys before. We spent an entire morning on this section. And I went through an extensively long, tedious process of explaining all this different stuff. And we get right toward the end, and I don't remember exactly who, but somebody said, "Are you saying these angels had sex with women?" And I said, "No, I think you just said that." But the point is, how did you come to that conclusion? You came to that conclusion by us looking at all these passages, and that's the conclusion you come to, right? So I don't have to tell you that. If you're just looking at all that we're going to look at, it's like, it seems, I don't understand that, but that seems like that's what that's saying. So, having said that, so who would these spirits in prison be? That's weird. What do you mean spirits in prison? Because they formerly did not obey. What did they not obey? That's another question. When did this happen? When God patiently waited in the days of Noah. Okay, so we know that there are these somethings who are now spirit. Maybe they were all along, I don't know, but they're spirits. They've been put in prison because they were disobedient in the days leading up to the flood. That's what Peter says. Okay. So, what do we know for sure? Spirits did not obey God in the days of Noah. We know that. Okay. This is 2 Peter. Interesting. He only wrote 2 letters, and he brings us up in both. Must be important to Peter. Okay. For God did not spare angels. Okay, now we're kind of being told a little bit more detail. These are not spirits as in you and I are spirits when we die. These are angels. When they sinned, so they committed a sin. They violated the rules of God, but cast them into hell. By the way, the word hell, I've talked about this when we went through 2 Peter. We translated in English hell. The Greek word used there is Tartarus. Does anybody recognize the word Tartarus? It's used once in the entire Bible. It's Greek mythology. It's where they put the demigods and the gods who are bad, they put them in Tartarus. So in Greek mythology, you have gods that behave badly, and the big god of Greek mythology takes the bad god and puts him in prison. That prison is a bottomless pit called Tartarus. And Peter says, "For he did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into Tartarus and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until judgment." So what we're seeing is that in 1 Peter he says they're in prison, and here he says they're in Tartarus, which is a prison for Elohim, let's call him that. I turned this dumb thing on one time and I kept copying slides and forgot to turn it off. Sorry, it's probably distracting.
I think it was good.
What do we know for sure? Here's the third one. We know that spirits are angels. We're told that by Peter. And they were cast into prison. And the prison is actually, Peter says it's Tartarus. That doesn't mean Greek mythology is true. It means that Greek mythology drew on truth as it created its mythology. That's what you see there. Okay, Jude. Now I want to remind you, although you once fully knew it, that Jesus, who saved a people out of the land of Egypt, afterward destroyed those who did not believe. And the angels, again confirming that, what was their sin? They did not stay in their own position of authority. They didn't stay where they were supposed to. They left their domain or their position of authority, or they did what they weren't supposed to do, but left their proper dwelling. Very specific. They were supposed to be here and they ended up over here. That's not right. That's the sin. He has kept in eternal chains under gloomy darkness until the judgment of the great day. Same thing that we see in Peter. So these angels who did not stay where they were supposed to, but went somewhere they weren't supposed to, he has now put in prison called Tartarus. They did not stay where they were supposed to. That's another thing we can know for sure. I just reminded me. Jane, I think you had a question and I forgot to come back to you. Sorry. Did I answer it?
Offspring.
Offspring, okay. Now here's
All
a...
male?
Do what? I think so. I don't see any reference anywhere to female angels. That's a modern incantation of something. Okay, verse 7, same passage. He's talking about these angels who did not stay in their proper dwelling. He's now kept them under judgment in these gloomy darkness and chains. What were they doing? Just as Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding city, which likewise, like who? Like the angels who didn't stay in their proper dwelling, which likewise indulged in sexual immorality and pursued unnatural desires. Now, what unnatural desire, right? Well, there was homosexuality, we saw that, but there was also a pursuit of angels, right? Two angels come in, they want these angels so badly that after they're blind, they still want them. I mean, you're not dissuading these people. They are not taking no for an answer. They want these guys. And what he's saying here is, it's the same kind of thing that we saw when they didn't stay in their proper position but got thrown into prison over it. Tartarus. He's connecting this that way. So what does that tell us? Their rebellion was sexual in nature. Exactly how? Well, I don't know if I can answer that. But I can tell you that it was a sexual related crime that they were committing that they're now in prison for. So these are just things that we know, but we don't know all the detail about.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
About Tartarus,
Mhm.
is that the same like hell as the lake of fire?
No.
Or
I would say it's the bottomless pit. It's in Revelation 9, and then you see Satan cast there. If somebody would want to read Luke 8:28, I did pull that up in my pod. Just grab it and flip to it. Luke 8:28. I don't have it on here. And if I switch screens, it screws this thing up. I'll let one of you read that.
When he saw Jesus, he cried out and fell at his feet, shouting at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had commanded the evil spirit to come out of the man. Am I still going?
Keep going.
Okay. Many times it had seized him, and though he was chained hand and foot, they kept under guard. He had broken his chains and had been driven by the demon into solitary places.
I think it's a translation issue.
Sorry.
No, maybe not. He says, "Don't torture us." Keep going. Is there a part where he says, have you come before the time?"
What is your name? Legion.
Legion.
Replied, because many demons had gone into him. They begged him repeatedly
There it is.
not to order them to go into the abyss.
Abyss, bottomless pit in some of your translations. They know where their brethren are at. They've been behaving badly. "Oh, no, don't send us there." "Don't send us to the bottomless pit, Tartarus, prison." And they say, "Let us go into the swine." And they go into the swine,
I
right?
never could figure that out, thank you. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
There's another piece to that. He does this outside of Israel. Remember when we looked at Psalms 82, these Elohim are ruling over these nations. And we saw that in Deuteronomy. We'll look at it again in weeks to come. So God assigns these different angelic beings to be over different nations. And they've behaved badly, and so he's disciplining them in Psalms 82. But he has kept a portion for himself. That's Jacob, Israel. That's his nation that he's going to have rule over. Jesus is in Israel casting out demons. Okay, no problem. But then he shows up in a Gentile area. And they're like, "Wait a minute, what are you doing here? This is our area." And no, I have control over all of it. Remember, "Oh God, take your inhabitants or take your possession of all the nations." This is kind of an early look at that. So that's why this was such a big deal. And they wanted to obviously stop him from advancing. So they say, "Let us go into the pigs." So he goes into a herd of 2,000 pigs, which they then run over a cliff and kill. And now everybody in the area is mad at Jesus and get out of here. But
What
obviously
happened to them
Jesus,
after they died, though?
the
Pigs died,
I would think they
just went.
came
someplace
out and
else.
went somewhere else, yeah. But
'Cause
the
they
point
would
is,
have to have a living body, right? Just
not necessarily. I mean,
necessarily.
I would think they can be uninhabited, but they would rather be inhabited, and that's why they wanted to go from something to something else. But I think they were doing that to try to create issues for Jesus, and he knows that, but he does it anyway. Because he's not going there yet. He's just going there to make a statement. And I think that's actually what you see in 2 Peter, or 1 Peter. When he goes to prison, he's not there preaching the gospel. He's there doing a divine nature of na-na-na-na-na kind of a thing. I won. He's dead. He's going to raise again. He goes and proclaims to the spirits in prison, "You failed." That's what that's about. It's not a going and rescuing prisoners. It's a going and saying, "Remember when you were trying to defeat the purposes of God? It didn't work." That's what that's about. All right. Back to our passage in chapter 6. These are mighty men who are men of old, men of renown. Then it says this: "The Lord saw that the wickedness of God was great in the earth." Oh, sorry. The wickedness, yes, thank you for that. "The wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." We live in a really screwed up world. But it isn't that every person you know is only evil always. You know what I'm saying? You see people who are unsaved seeing a kid in a house on fire and they go running in to rescue them. That's not evil. No, it doesn't get them salvation, but it's not evil. If he had lived in that day, he'd have grabbed marshmallows, at a party. Hey, we're getting to watch somebody burn to death. Woohoo! That's only evil all the time. So my point is, there's something weird going on here. This is only evil, and it's all the time. So I do think he's trying to make the point here. This is not like people are behaving badly. There's something weird happening here. You'll see that as we continue to go. What else do we know for sure? We know that man's sin was out of control. This isn't like we got sinful people. This is Wild West on steroids and machine guns. I mean, this is just way over the top bad stuff, always. So, what do we know for sure? We know that Nephilim were on the earth. We know that the spirits, or Elohim, they did not obey God in the days of Noah. That the spirits are angels. They were cast into a prison known as Tartarus, which is a prison for Elohim. The angels didn't stay where they were supposed to. The angels' rebellion was sexual in nature, and that man's sin had gotten completely out of control. Those are facts that we can know. Okay? And then it says this, and the Lord regretted that he made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart.
Chris?
Yep.
Is he talking about all men or just the Nephilim in there?
Well, let me hold an answer on that for a moment. So my spirit shall not abide forever, for his days shall be 120 years. So he's going to start. There's two ways to read this. It's saying that there's 120 years, there's going to be a flood. That's what he means. Or it means that men aren't going to live 800-900 years anymore. They're going to start living to 120 years old. Both happen to be true. I just don't know which this is referencing. Because up to this point, they've been living 800-900 years. And right after the flood, the time frame of their lifespan goes down to where 120 or 130 is about the limit. But it's also about 120 years later that the flood happens. So which does it, I don't know. Okay. So my question is two things. One, what do we not know for sure about this rebellion? There are things that we can conjecture about, but we don't know, right? So let's establish that. We don't know how widespread this was. Is this like everybody? Or is this just some people? What's going on here? We don't know that. How angels were able to have children with women? We don't really know that. That's weird. I'm not going to be able to give you a good answer on that. So that we don't know. Third, if the Nephilim were the offspring of the rebellion, we're not explicitly told that. So is that what that means or not? I can't give you this is what it is. Thus saith the Lord, right? So those are three things we don't know. Now, what in history might lend credibility to this idea of Elohim having children with human women? Track with me on this for a moment. It's going to seem like I've completely switched gears. I'm not. Just track with me. This is the Chinese symbol for boat, okay? If you're Chinese and you're writing boat, that's what you do. You paint this. It's boat, okay? Boat is made up of three other symbols: people, 8, and then vessel. So the symbol of boat is made up of three symbols: the symbol for vessel, the symbol for 8, and the symbol for people. That's kind of odd. Maybe they only had 8-person boats back when they did this. I don't know. But that's an odd thing, right? You'd think it might be float or something might be in there, but no, it's 8 and persons and vessel, and that's boat. Here's another one. Together, earth, and 8. Those are three symbols, and when you put them together, you get total. The symbol for total, if you have 8 apples total, right? If you'd have a symbol for 8, and you'd have a symbol for apples, and then you'd have a symbol for total if you wanted to write that out in Chinese. But the symbol total is represented by those three. Do you see how that works? This is up here, this is this line, and these two are down here. You see how you merge those together and you get the symbol total, okay? If you add 2 total water equals flood. So when you want to write the flood symbol, you put water total and 8 on the earth were together. And that's Chinese And that's very old. I don't know if it's like a 3,000 or 4,000 year old I mean, it's way back is when they invented these characters.
8 people on the ark.
There was 8 people on a boat out of the earth. My point is they didn't get that from Moses. They got that from the descendants of Noah at the Tower of Babel, and the people who left there and became China knew the story. And that's why they put this in their symbology.
Total water, it says flood because there's no land if it's total
Right,
water.
total water. And the total is 8 people together. So my point is, that doesn't tell you much, but it is a clue of how this stuff works, is my point. The truth is the truth, okay? So if you're Chinese and you don't have a Bible, you still have ancestry that went through the flood. And so just by word of mouth, you know the story of the flood and you incorporate that into your culture because that's true. It's just a true story. And it's part of your history. It's not part of Christian history or Jewish history. It's part of history. And this is how this shows up, okay?
I had heard a documentary that looked at Sanskrit and all these old ancient, every language has a
similar
story about the
things.
flood.
Yeah.
Everyone.
Demigods, if you've not been up on your Greek mythology lately, let me clue you in. A demigod, or demigods are said to be the offspring of a god and a human. Hercules, probably the most famous, right? God, Elohim, okay? So the offspring of an Elohim and a human are known as demigods. I thought, all right, let me pull up a list of some of these demigods. And I started typing them out, and then I opened up something else and gave up.
Oh my. Oh my God.
That's a list of the cultures that have demigods as part of their history. I'm not going to read them all. I mean, there's the Greek mythology, and some of those you may have heard of, Jason and Hercules. And then you have Egyptian mythology, Roman mythology, African mythology, Filipino mythology. I don't even know how you pronounce that one. Hindu, Norse, like from Norway, Northern Europe, Celtic, and then there it says other, Georgian, Sumerian, New Zealand, Hawaiian, and Assyrian. Those are the different, that's probably not a complete list. I saw Hawaiian, Polynesian, that I didn't bother to add. What is that? It's like the symbols, right? It's like this. It's the truth that's kind of hidden into a culture. So you've come off the ark, you're at the Tower of Babel, and now you're 100 years later, and your great-great-grandfather tells these stories, right? What's the story? There were these beings that came and were with women, and they had these incredible, mighty men, and they were demigods, and they just get talked into the cultural ethos that is underlined by actual truth. All of those are false in that Hercules is not a real character, right? But it's a story that's told to try to communicate something they've heard through oral tradition. My point is, you would expect that if what we saw here is true, the way I'm explaining it. Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards. And I would say whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of men and children were born to them. These were the mighty men of old, men of renown. Again, that doesn't make sense in light of the Sethite theory, where these are just, some unsaved reprobate woman who seduces a godly man and then they have kids. That's not what that's describing. So I do think that that's what this is, but I don't think you could necessarily say we know for certain that Nephilim are the offspring. But I think that's what they are. So here's my answer to this thing. A common theme in many ancient cultures are demigods. This would not be surprising if Elohim and women had children of great renown before and after the flood. For example, and I gave you two, Gilgamesh and Hercules are both said to be the offspring of a god and a human.
But
I did this and then I went looking for it, and then I found this is prolific in all these different cultures. Go ahead.
But how can that be if for basically everyone after the flood were descendants of Noah? So that means he would have been a descendant.
Oh, you mean because of the afterwards?
Yes.
Right.
Before
Yes.
and after.
Well, so why are you saying they were all, so you're saying, is Noah a Nephilim? Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I think so,
Okay.
because everybody was destroyed.
Right,
so-
everybody was destroyed. Noah was not a Nephilim, let me say that. There is a theory like that, and that's not, doesn't hold water. No pun intended. It really wasn't intended, but anyway. Most of my good puns are completely accidental. Okay. I am going to deal with the afterword, and we'll talk about it more later. But how did we get Nephilim? If I'm correct, how did we get that? Well, we had some angels cohabit with women and had Nephilim. So how many times did that happen? Don't know. Did it stop happening at the flood? I don't think so.
Oh, no, there's a thought.
Yeah, I don't think it was as widespread, but it doesn't say it ended at the flood. In fact, it says, and after. So we know that after the flood, this occurred. But, okay, go ahead.
Also, it said that God put them in the pit so
Right.
that the ark could be built. Sounded like what you were
No,
saying
I don't
earlier.
think that. I think that the angels who behaved that way when the flood
When
happened,
they were, well, I thought
Angels
it was
can't
when-
die, right?
When the earth was being
right, so my point is he kills all the people,
ark, you know.
and then all the angels, he just rounds them up and puts them in prison so they don't do that anymore. Think of it like this. There's a biker gang of 1,000 guys, and 100 of them get really rowdy and go tear up a town, and the sheriff arrests them and puts them in jail. Well, you got 900 of them left. Next week, they go to another town, and 10 of them, they learn something, 10 of them tear up the town, right? It doesn't mean it can't happen again. It just might not happen on the scale at which it once happened. I think that's the answer. It's called second incursion theory, and we'll deal with it in future weeks.
Chris,
Go ahead.
I was looking up for a definition of antient. does that
Of
mean?
what?
Antient?
Antient?
You had that in your description there. Common theme in many antient, or in, you mean
Oh,
ancient?
I did. See, ancient. So here's the thing that's getting more funny. I can't spell, and you all know that. So now I have Brenda check it, and she caught one. And then Alan said, "Oh, here, you forgot this downstairs. And by the way, she missed one. Here's another one." And so all three of us missed ancient. So there you go.
Well, I looked it up, there is no such word as
Good.
antient.
Ancient. That's what that is. Ancient. That's a spell checker.
Afraid he found it.
Here's the point. I knew I didn't know how to spell ancient, so I just throw in something close, and then it suggests, oh, I think that one's ancient, and I tap it. I usually synonym those, but I forgot to. All right, let's keep moving before we run out of time. What can we reasonably infer about this rebellion? So now we're not in the what we know or what we don't know. We've established that. Now we're into what might we reasonably infer. So now we're off into a little bit of speculation. But I think there's some, like, are the Nephilim the offspring? I think so, but that's an inference. That's not a statement of fact from the scriptures, right? So here's Genesis 6:1. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. Every intention of the thought of his heart was only evil continually. That's pretty incredible. Every intention, only and always, that's pretty strong, right? The Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth. I have a quick question here. What is meant by that's regretted? It tells us it grieved him in his heart. I just think that's the most understated statement I've seen. Think about this, and if you're a parent, maybe you've thought about this. You can all remember Columbine, right? And the tragedy that is, and the parents of the kids who were killed, right? What is it like to be Dylan whoever's mom? The shooter's mom. How grievous to the heart is that? I think maybe almost worse than your kid got killed. You helped produce that, right? God has established for himself image bearers. Go, be me on earth. They are so far gone at this point, he has to wipe them all out. This rebellion caused God deep anguish. And I just sat there at the computer for several minutes trying to come up with a better way to say that. Because that is so understated, I think. Is that part of the purpose of it? I think so. I think these angels are in such a state of rebellion. You've seen this. Some kid in a movie or something, and they're doing it just to torque their dad off, or just to make their mom mad, right? They're doing it on purpose. Just to why? Because they hate them, right? That's what this is. He loves these people. Let's destroy them. It'll kill him. That's what's going on. And then it grieves the heart of God that this has gone so far out of line. Now, it's not like he doesn't know, or he could have reined it in earlier and all that, but he lets it go, and then he does deal with it. Go ahead.
Yeah, was part of the purpose to corrupt the bloodline so that Christ couldn't be born?
I think that is one of the reasons that it would have happened, yes. Because Satan's been told the seed of the woman will crush you. And he's like, well, then let's make sure that can't happen. I think that's part of why it's happening. All right, I got to keep moving here. We got a fair amount yet to go. Section-wise, not just in the text. All right, so the Lord said, okay, so this is his response to this grievous thing. I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I made them. God is not repenting. He has not changed his mind. It's simply a statement of grief, right? I am sorry I ever had you, to your kid who's just killed a dozen people. It's like, it's very grievous to him. That's what he's talking about there. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generations. Now, is that repetitive, or is that two different things? He was a righteous man, blameless in his generations. Let me show you this. This is King James. I forgot to throw that on there. This is King James, 9 through the end of that same section. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a just man and perfect in his generations. What does that mean? All of his ancestry were perfect. Nobody had ever done anything wrong. Obviously, that's not what it means. So what does it mean? It is already saying he's just. That doesn't mean he's perfect. It just means that he is a man who follows after God, like you follow after God, right? So why is he telling us he's perfect in his generations? He's blameless in his generations. And then it talks about him walking with God and fathering Ham, Shem, and Japheth. The earth also was corrupt before God, and the earth was filled with violence. For God looked upon the earth, and behold, it was corrupted. It was corrupted. It wasn't that they were behaving badly, it's that the earth had been corrupted. Exclamation. Now, granted, that's probably not in the Hebrew, but there's something about the Hebrew that gives it an emphasis, and so they're giving us an explanation. For all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth, but Noah is perfect in his generations. The end of all flesh has come before me. This is prior to the flood. The end of all flesh has come before him. For the earth is filled with violence through them, and behold, I will destroy them with the earth. So back to our main ESV translation. Now the earth, I'm going to reread this now in the ESV. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight, and the earth was filled with violence. And God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth. Inference, not statement of fact. Let me read one more. I have determined to make an end of all flesh. So here's the inference. This rebellion was widespread enough that God described the world as all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. That's how widespread this was. That's an inference, but I think it's a decent one. Only Noah was said to be perfect in his generations, meaning him and his descendants then, right? The only solution was to destroy everyone except 8 people who were still sinful. He's not eliminating sinful people. He kept 8 sinful people. They were righteous. They were following after God. But these are still, he's not starting over with a new Adam and Eve, right? He's starting over with Noah and his 3 sons. And as you read into chapter 9 and 10, and you see after the flood, they were not necessarily good guys. This seems, catch that, this seems to be about more than people behaving badly. So here's my point. Why did God flood the earth? Because people were really bad. Well, we're really bad now. Why did he flood the earth? I think it's because this, whatever was occurring, had gotten so out of hand. We were running out of people that were not involved in this. And so he wipes everything out, starts over again with a family that is sinful, and it's a mess, and that's who he works with, and he moves forward from there. But I think that's what's happening there. So why does this topic matter? The nature of this rebellion helps explain the reason for the flood. I think it puts new light onto why would God have wiped out everybody? Well, if what I'm conjecturing is accurate, that helps explain that. He's not killing off everything because people are behaving badly. He's killing off everything that has corrupted its way. Go ahead.
Could it also be that Noah's bloodline had no Elohim in it?
That's what, yeah, I'm agreeing with you. That's what it means by perfect. It's still just human. There's no.
Yeah.
Now, by the way, let me throw this in. I was going to talk about this at some point. If you go back to our text, let me find the one that's got the earlier passage in it. What is it something that you notice here about the Nephilim? If the Nephilim are what's being described, what are they? Sons and daughters, or so they had the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were mighty, what? Men. Who were of old, men of renown. They had men, they had humans. So these are not, three-legged, hybrid. No, they're men. They're men. They're human. So think about this. I'm not comparing these, but I want to help you see this. Jesus is born of Mary, right? God is his father, virgin born, and yet what percent human is Jesus? 50%? 100%. He's human. He's fully human. Why? Because he's born of a woman. He's completely human. So the idea of a human woman having an offspring that has Elohim origin does not make it a hybrid. It makes it a human. Now, in the case of Jesus, that's a miracle. There's not even a sexual involvement. He's born of a virgin. God doesn't come down in the middle of the night and do something. No. He just, and he sparks life in the womb of Eve. That's totally unique. Mary, sorry, thank you for that. Moses and the ark, okay. But there's a great lesson there to be learned for all of you. Everybody in this room does that.
Amen.
So when you get in an argument and they know that you said whatever, and you know that you said, you might not have. Be humble. Say, oh, that's not what I thought I said, sorry. Your life will go so much smoother once you figure that out. So, I am not comparing.
That's where you just say, yes, honey.
Yeah. I am not comparing these Nephilim with Jesus. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm saying is, if Nephilim are the offspring of Elohim and humans, that does not make them anything other than human. But they are different than other humans. I don't know exactly how, but they're considered corrupt, I think.
They have souls.
In some form, yeah. Now here's an argument, and this was made by the Jewish prior, like in between the testamental periods. They believed that the demons we see in the New Testament are the disembodied spirit of the Nephilim. Catch?
Say that again.
Yeah. So you have fallen angels. They are have children with women called Nephilim, and when the Nephilim die, they're not going to hell, they're not going to heaven, but they're dead. So what do? They become demons. That's a view. I'm not saying I even believe that. I'm saying that's what some would say demons are. And then they are what inhabits people, is this spirit of these Nephilim, which we refer to today as demons. The other view is that demons are simply a reference to fallen angels. So I'm just saying we don't really know what happened to these Nephilim, because the Elohim that had them, they're in the bottomless pit.
You're gonna hate this question.
Okay.
I know you and I have discussed this a long time ago.
Okay.
About, there's a faction of people out there that believe the Nephilim, there's still Nephilim walking the earth.
On the earth, yeah.
Yeah, after you've studied all this, what is your decision on that?
I don't see a reason that can't be the case. I think that might be what you see like with the Antichrist or something like that. I'm not really sure. That brings us to, why does this topic matter, right? The nature of the rebellion helps explain the reason for the flood, and the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards. What about the Nephilim who were on the earth after the flood? So we'll talk about that in 2 weeks. There's your cliffhanger. That is going to be the topic in 2 weeks. And the reason is, I think that actually might be maybe more important than even all the rest of this. But you can't start there. It doesn't make any sense unless you understand everything we've looked at thus far. But I think it's actually really important that we understand that. And I'm not going to go into now. I don't know if it's happening now. I'm not talking about that after. I'm talking about in biblical history after. There's some just like, how in the world do we not know that's in there type stuff. I mean, there's actually quite a bit after that we need to talk about that I think will be helpful for you. So let me pray so we can get out of here, and then I'll hang out and talk, and I'm sure you got questions. So, dear Heavenly Father, thank you for our morning. Again, as I seem to always say, thank you for your word. There is just an incredible reservoir of truth that you have revealed to us if we're willing to search it out, and I am just grateful for that. So many of the answers that we look for are there. I am grateful for scholars and people like that can help us dig through that and find those answers. Lord, I pray that if anything that I've said this morning is inaccurate or whatever, I pray that you'd filter that out. And you know that was my prayer before, is that I would only speak truth But I pray that if I didn't do that, that you'd help clear that up for people. Lord, help us to have a sense of confidence about the scriptures and the way that they lay things out. Don't let us be ashamed in front of people that are, well educated and tell us that the Bible is flawed in all these different ways. Help us to have a confidence in your word and in you. Help us to have boldness that we would speak to others about the great love that you have for us, that you are willing to come and die and rescue us and give us an ability to have relationship with you. Just pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.